Welcome back to the Chelsweets kitchen. Today we are discussing how to start your own cake business from home. So we're going to cover a few different topics today, including what permits or regulations you need to make sure that you are safe to sell cakes out of your home, sourcing your ingredients, and also setting your price with your clients to make sure that you're charging a fair price, but you're also taking into account all the time and effort that you're putting into your cakes. Of course, how to keep a steady business and how to keep loyal clients. Also, the equipment that you'll need to be able to start your cake business. We'll also discuss training and learning new techniques and how you tackle that when you're a new baker or you're a developing baker. And last but not least, we'll discuss time management, which is super important because baking is so labor intensive. You really need to make sure that you're approaching it the right way so that you don't lose your mind in the process. So we'll start off with rules and regulations of starting your own business. So rules and regulations can vary drastically depending on what country you live in, what state you live in. Some areas are more lax and some are super strict. I live here in New York and the standards here are extremely strict. So it's a lot harder to get started in a state like this. However, it's important that you look online at the different regulations of wherever you live to make sure that you're abiding by them and you're doing your best to make sure that, like here in New York, you have to have a food handler's permit, which is really important, and there's an equivalent of that in a lot of different areas. And it just helps make sure that you really understand how food needs to be handled, what temperature foods should be stored at, and things like that. So here, if you wanted to sell baked goods out of your home, you would need to have a separate kitchen that's used exclusively for your business, and it would need to be certified by the state board. So it's extremely strict here. You also can't sell at any kind of farmers markets or anything like that without a certificate. So obviously there are rules in place because it's really important that you're meeting certain health codes and that everything that you're serving is up to a certain standard. Here in New York, it's extremely difficult to get your kitchen certified. And the honest truth that no one really ever wants to say is that a lot of small businesses do start out in their home and their kitchen isn't certified. So when you're just starting out and you're selling to your friends and family or people you know, a lot of times people do sell out of just their main kitchen. However, as your business kind of develops and you start selling to people you don't know or you start really having an increased volume, it is important that you look into renting out a commercial space or having some kind of space that you can use that's exclusively for baking. You kind of have to assess that as your business grows and kind of figure out what's right for you. So when I started baking, I was just making cakes for my friends at my office and for my coworkers, and I never really intended for it to be a business. So I made everything out of my apartment, and that's where I started my baking journey. So along the way, I've kind of transitioned into content creation, so I no longer sell my cakes. So I do everything in my apartment. This is my apartment kitchen. Another thing is that if you really do want your baking company to be a business, you need to get a business license. So here in New York, you get a business license based on what borough you live in. So I got a business license for Manhattan, and you just go to your local courthouse and they issue it to you. It's not too expensive. I think mine was about $100 or something like that. But this definitely varies from place to place. But if you do want to be official, that is another step that you need to take. So once you've done a bit of research into the regulations of wherever you live, the next thing to consider is pricing and sourcing of your ingredients. So when I'm talking about pricing, I mean pricing of cakes that you're selling to your customers. So this is something that I get asked so frequently. There is no right or wrong answer for this. But in general, you should be pricing it as the cost of your ingredients plus the number of hours that you expect to spend on the cake times your hourly rate or what you value your time at. So when I first started, I thought that I was competing against the price of supermarket cakes, and I was like, oh, a cake is $30. I'm making this medium-sized cake. My price should be $30 as well. But you have to keep in mind that a supermarket cake isn't custom made, it's run-of-the-mill, and it's not the same thing as what you're offering. So I guess it kind of depends on what your business structure is, but I always took customized orders so I could make a variety of flavors, sizes, decorations. And when someone's asking for that, that comes at a premium. It is worth pricing your cakes more than a supermarket cake because that is not your competition. You are offering a different product. I wish I had known that earlier, but it is also hard because when you're new to baking, you're not confident always in your skills, and you don't always think that your time is that valuable. Because for me, I used to look at it kind of as like a practice cake. It was developing my skills. And that is hard. So when you're a new baker, maybe you don't charge as much for your time because you're still learning, or you might not be very efficient and it might take you a long time to do certain techniques. And you kind of need to consider that as you price out a cake. So I think that pricing a cake also comes down to your demand and who your clientele are. So here in New York, people are willing to pay a pretty penny for a customized cake, and especially if you are willing to deliver it. So I charge a separate delivery fee as well. However, if you don't get very many orders, it might be more difficult to charge a higher price because you might really feel like you need that order, or you don't want someone to go to someone else because you're too expensive. And that is hard, and at the end of the day, it really just comes down to what you value your time at, because you don't want to spend hours and hours making a cake that you're not getting paid for. I mean, if you are really trying to just focus on improving your technique, maybe that's an investment that you're willing to make, but in general, you should be pricing out that time. So don't undervalue yourself and make sure that you really are charging what you're worth. So on the other side of pricing is sourcing all of your ingredients and trying to get the best deal, right? Because you want to have the biggest margin that you can. So for me, I live here in Manhattan, and this is literally my entire kitchen. It looks bigger than it seems, I promise. So I can't have huge bags of flour bought at Costco or Sam's Club. I would love to, and that's definitely the best place to get a great deal and the best way to find savings. But since I can't do that, I really try to focus on what stores have the best deals. So for me, I really like to get my flour and sugar at my local grocery store where it's cheapest, but I actually have found that butter and vanilla are the best deal at Whole Foods. So I think it's kind of getting to know your different stores around you and finding out what brands you like working with and where you can get the best deals. It is hard because, you know, you always hear bake with the finest ingredients, that'll make the best baked goods. But it kind of is a delicate balance between how much you want to spend on your ingredients. Like, you don't want to spend like $25 on rare aged vanilla when you're trying to make a $50 cake. So you do have to take that into consideration when you're buying your ingredients. Another thing to keep in mind is if you need something like a unique extract or edible gold or something along those lines, I really recommend trying to find it online. I order almost all of those types of things on Amazon, and it comes quickly, it's reliable, you can read reviews to make sure that you're getting a good quality product, and it almost always is cheaper than you could find it at a cake store or a craft store. So that's another great way to find savings. So once you figure those things out, it's time to try to create a steady and loyal client base. So there's a few different ways you can go about doing this. Number one, I think the most important thing is to have really great baked goods or cakes. When I used to accept cake orders, I would get tons of returning customers or people that would say, I was at a party and I tried one of your cakes, I loved it, can I order one? So word of mouth is really great, and making good quality baked goods is a great way to get your name out there. Every time you send out a cake into the world to a party or an event, tons of different people are trying that, and if they like your cake and they have a party coming up, they're gonna be like, who made that cake? Let me get their business card, I'd love to order from them. So if you think about that, every cake you send out could be targeting all kinds of new people and new business. So having a really great product is a great way to build your business. Other than that, if you're just starting out and you aren't getting tons of orders, it's really great to leverage your friends and family. And I know that sounds so simple and so basic, but it's a really great way to start because, again, the more cakes you get out in the world, the more people are trying your cakes and the more people are becoming aware of what you have to offer. Of course, social media is also a great way to get word out about your business, but it's not that easy to grow on social media, especially in this day and age. You know, it's hard to get traction. So I'm actually going to do a part 2 of this tutorial, which is going to be how to grow your cake business on social media. It's a whole different animal, and I'll go into all the details of that, so stay tuned. But for right now, we're just working on building our base business. So the next question that I get asked a lot is around equipment. So when you're first starting out, it can be kind of a big investment and a big undertaking trying to buy everything that you think you need. There are so many tools in baking, and a lot of things are easier if you have the right tools. But at the same time, when you're just starting out, you might not have a ton of capital or, money sitting around to invest. So when I first started, I got the cheapest everything. And I had just started baking, I didn't have a ton of orders, and I didn't know how serious all of this was gonna be. So I just wanted to get, some functional tools that worked, that I could get the job done with. And I didn't want to spend a ton of money, and that's totally fine. You don't have to get the nicest everything when you're first starting out. This was my first cake stand. You can hear it kind of like makes noise as it spins. and it's not super smooth, but I think it was under $30 and it worked great. So a couple years in, I decided I wanted to upgrade, and I'd been making money from all the cakes I'd been selling. So I invested in this Ateco 612, and I have never looked back. It's fantastic. So my guidance to you is, if you're just starting, you don't know how serious your cake business is going to be, just get the basics. You don't need super fancy things. However, if you want to do this full time, you see yourself making a ton of cakes, it's worth investing in the good quality equipment from the beginning, if you're able to. Another great example of that is my KitchenAid. So when I first started baking, I had a regular hand mixer that I think was $20 that I got at Kmart. And it worked just fine. It got the job done. I wasn't making tons of cakes, and it was great. And then after my cake business became a little more serious, I finally treated myself to a KitchenAid, which was such a good investment. I use it all the time. It's super reliable. There's nothing wrong with starting off with a hand mixer. So once you have all the tools you need, then you have to tackle all the different techniques that people may ask you to make when they place orders. So this can be difficult, and I think that it's really a challenge when you're first starting baking, because when you take an order, you know, you want to push your limits and your boundaries, and you want to push yourself to become better, but you also need to keep in mind your abilities, and you don't want to take on something that you can't accomplish. So it's a really delicate line that you'll have to work with, and I think you'll definitely learn as you go if you do take on a project that's too big or too challenging. So for me, I didn't get too many crazy cake orders, but I would get some emails that would ask for like 4-tiered cakes, and I don't have a car. So when I deliver a cake, I either deliver it on foot or I take a taxi. There's no way I could do a 4-tiered cake. So when I get an order like that, I would just say, I'm sorry, I don't do wedding cakes, or I can't make a cake that's that large. Not only was delivery a problem, but also my kitchen. Like, I couldn't store 4 tiers in my fridge at the time. My fridge was much smaller. So it's important to keep in mind what you're able to do and what you're capable of when you are accepting orders. But that doesn't mean that you should say no to anything that's new or scary, because you're going to learn by doing, or at least that's how I did. So I have no formal training. I kind of learned as I went, and I watched a ton of YouTube tutorials to learn how to do different techniques. So I really do believe that you can be self-taught and learn along the way. However, if you are really serious about cake decorating and you want to learn all the basics right up front, you can totally enroll in a basic cake decorating class. They're offered all over the place, and they also have master classes online that you can pay for and watch. So there's a lot of different avenues you can go in terms of learning new techniques and also in terms of practicing. And the last topic that I wanted to touch on was time management. Whether you're in school and you're trying to start baking, you work full-time and are trying to bake on the side, which is what I do, or if you're going to do this full-time but you plan on taking a ton of cake orders, time management is so important. And I found that it's really great to try to plan ahead as far as you can. So if you can make, cake layers in advance, or you can make a double batch of your cake recipe, or you can make frosting in advance and freeze it a week before. If you know you have a really busy week ahead of you, or you have a ton of cakes coming up, it's so helpful. So I think that planning and really I like to make lists of what I need to do every day, which is so type A, I know, but it really helps me visualize what I need to get done and makes sure that I'm managing my time correctly, so that way I can have cakes done on time. Time management is also really important for keeping your sanity, which sounds silly, but a lot of us take on so much that we don't have tons of extra time. So if you can find efficiencies in any way in baking, especially when you're making everything from scratch, it's really important, because you still need to, see your friends or see your loved ones or spend time with your kids. You can't have baking be your whole life. You have to have other things as well. And I definitely have had trouble with that. So I got to the point where I was working, in public accounting. I was working 50 hours or 60 hours a week, and I was making 8 cakes a week from scratch. And just even, emailing back and forth with clients, determining, cake details, delivering cakes or arranging pickups, and of course making the cakes, I just wasn't sleeping, and I wasn't seeing any of my friends. I was miserable, and I really had to take a step back and kind of reassess my life. So it's really important that you make sure that while you may love baking and it's great when you're making money from it and you have tons of orders, you also need to always work to keep some semblance of work-life balance. That is my biggest tip to anyone who's trying to start a cake business, because it can be all consuming, and especially when so many of us are kind of like type A perfectionists. You can spend hours on a cake, you know, just to get things just so or just right, and make sure that you don't burn out. So that is all the advice that I have for you guys today about starting a cake business from home. If I didn't cover any questions you guys have, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I'll try to answer as many as I can. And also stay tuned for part 2 of this series, which is going to discuss how to grow your cake business on social media. So thanks so much for joining me today, you guys. Hopefully I'll see you guys again soon for my next video. See you later.